Hello everyone, thanks for coming to watch. It's Halloween 2021 and I'll be making a metal pumpkin spider today. I'm starting off by measuring out these two circles right on my workbench with a couple supports there, and the pumpkin and the gourd should fit in there pretty nicely. Both the pumpkin and the gourd were grown in my backyard this year, so this really makes this whole project homemade. To make the loops for the frame, I'll be using this tool that I made a while ago. It's just a few steel pins that move on a pivot, and it's made for bending really any steel piece that you can fit in there. The most will fit, I think, is 1/2 inch, but it's working pretty well, and I can get almost a perfect 5-inch circle. Somewhere around here, I noticed that the tool is working its way out of my makeshift clamp, so I really need to figure out a way to hold it better. I'm in a new shop now, so I haven't had a chance to put up a vise or something better to hold this. There it goes. For the 5-inch circle, I managed to find a piece of scrap that was just the right length, but for the smaller one, I needed to cut one, and it's just the same process of slowly bending it and watching that the radius stays the same. You can really see that blue bar flexing on the table. It's really not meant to be used as a clamp, and I'll be making a video on the whole table pretty soon. That's it for the two circles, and now I just need to cut the supports that will be connecting the two circles together. I just made the two little connector pieces out of the same material, 3/8 steel round bar, and I'll be welding it all together. I set up the whole thing on a couple stands here and grounded my welder to that plate on the bottom so I don't have to mess with a ground clamp while working on this. Started off with tacking everything together, and then it's just a matter of filling in all those gaps. I'm not really worried about the welds looking any good on this project. It's a spider after all, so it's meant to be a little bumpy and coarse. There, let's get that hot frame out of the way and start on the legs. I just used another picture of a spider and scaled up to come up with this 3-part leg that I'm going to be cutting out of a 1/2 inch rebar. Originally I was planning to use just regular 1/2 inch rebar, but the only thing they had at the store was this epoxy coated stuff. I figured it would be fine. I would just grind off the epoxy, and where I left it would be better to protect from the rain outdoors. For the knee joints on the legs, I need to cut these notches into the rebar because my tool just won't bend the rebar that tight of an angle. Now this was the fun part, shaping the leg talons. I think this part is what made the spider stand out and look really spooky. I started off by rounding off the end of the rebar, kind of following one of those rings on the rebar to make it look like the talon really is coming out of the leg. And then I just sharpened it down from the sides and added a curve on the fronts, smoothing everything out to give it as spooky of a look as I could. With the shaping of the talon finished, I'm just removing the epoxy around all the joints so I can actually weld them. Now back on the bending tool, I'm doing a little bend on the front joint, and on the back one where I cut the notch, I'm doing almost a 90-degree bend, and that notch really helps getting the metal to form the way I want it to. The last thing to do is cut an angle on these legs so they sit right on the body of the spider frame. And with all the legs done, I put the spider body on this steel block, and I'm just making sure everything fits and looks good. Those middle legs had to be bent at an even steeper angle, and the rebar was just too brittle, so I ended up cutting them, and I'll be welding them in 2 pieces. The assembly process was pretty simple. I just held the legs in place and tacked them on. The middle ones I had to take on and off a few times to get the angle right, but overall it was pretty simple. After all the tacks were done, I think it all looked pretty good, so I just went right ahead and started filling everything in. Made sure to make the welds extra globby and extra rough to really give the sculpture that spidery, spindly look. After the spider had a chance to cool down, I used this brass brush in a drill to clean up all the welds and get off any burnt epoxy and anything that would keep the paint from sticking. And the last step I wanted to do was to really smooth out these talons. I used a Scotch-Brite pad on an air grinder and really took my time. Just worked on smoothing out each of those talons really well. And finally, the last step, to paint the spider. I'm rolling out a sheet of this craft paper to keep my table clean. And another great use I found of that blue extension bar on my table is pinching that craft paper in and keeping everything tidy. I'm using the Rust-Oleum Universal Metallic Carbon Mist paint. It's a little bit brown but mostly black and has some gloss to it. I'm putting on some heavy coats and I'm finding that this paint really doesn't run or drip much. For the extra $3 for the can, I think it was worth it. Since this guy would be living outside in the rain and the morning frost in October, I ended up doing 5 coats of paint. And while the paint dried, I got to carve the spider body and some other pumpkins. I got to share some pieces with my doggy Luna here. I've always liked Halloween because it lets everyone be a little bit creative. Even if you can't draw or don't have any art skills, you can carve a pumpkin or make a costume or even decorate your lawn or your room. Thanks for watching, everyone, and here is the final reveal. Happy Halloween! Oh, and if you got this far, this is my cat Knox. He's a shy boy, but he's exploring this time.